Greetings in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Welcome to Voicewatch, prophetic news for the week ending July 26, 2015, bringing you the world's news as it pertains to end times Bible prophecy and the end of the age. This past week was another very exciting week for Bible prophecy. We are going to talk about two different subjects today in our report. The first one is going to be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, which Jesus references in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, as a sign of the end of the age. The other topic we're going to discuss, which we have discussed before, is this DNA manipulation. But this article that I'm going to bring to your attention today really sums up the whole DNA subject and brings out the dangers, and I feel like it really is very interesting, and also the DNA manipulation is accelerating. Let's begin now with our earthquake report, and let me mention that as I am taping this video, which is July 27th, Alaska has had 19 earthquakes, with the highest one with the magnitude of 6.9. So really the earthquakes are increasing every week. I have to say that these earthquakes have been increasing, and in diverse places, just like Jesus said that they would. Okay, here we go. Last week there were 98 earthquakes with a magnitude of 4.0 and above on the Richter scale. 18 of these earthquakes were 4.8 or 4.9, and 28 of these earthquakes had a magnitude of 5.0 and above, which I will list for you. I get this information from the United States Government Earthquake website. July 20th. 5.6 Southeast Indian Ridge, and this is a tectonic plate boundary on the southern Indian Ocean floor. That's this Southeast Indian Ridge. And 5.1 Southeast Pacific Ridge, which is another group of tectonic plates that's also called the southern section of the Pacific Rise. July 21st, 5.1 Japan, 5.2 Tonga, 5.4 Southwest Indian Ridge. July 22nd, 5.2 Japan, 5.6 Indonesia. July 23rd, 5.1 Central Mid-Atlantic Ridge, 5.1 Japan, 5.0 Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and 5.3 Solomon Islands. Now, very briefly, the Solomon Islands are located in the South Pacific, but this Atlantic Ridge is located, it is an undersea mountain range that extends from the north of Greenland all the way down to below South America. And interestingly, the country of Iceland is actually part of this Atlantic Ridge, and this Atlantic Ridge is the largest mountain range in the world. Okay, July 24th, 5.0 Bellany Islands, and these islands are uninhabited, and they are located in the Southern Ocean, and they are part of Antarctica. 5.2 Greece, 5.0 China, 5.0 Solomon Islands, 5.1 Pakistan, 5.4 Indonesia, and 5.5 Chile. July 25th, 5.3 Peru, 5.1 Indonesia, 5.1 Alaska, and 5.1 Guam. July 26th, 5.0, 5.0, and 6.0 Indonesia, 5.1 and 5.5 Tonga, and 5.0 Fiji. Moving on to our headlines only portion of the report. Daily Telegraph, Spanish town grants cats and dogs rights as non-human neighbors. CBS Detroit, group to unveil Satan's statue in Detroit during largest public satanic ceremony in history. They still don't know where they're going to actually place this monument, but the unveiling of it is happening in Detroit very, very soon, one of these next few days. Okay, CBS, San Francisco Bay Area. Device turns iPad into sperm tester. Startup seeks FDA approval. MSNBC.com. More children in United States live in poverty now than before the Great Recession. Mail Online. Should robots have human rights? Act now to regulate killer machines before they multiply and demand the right to vote, warns legal expert. Robots will need new laws to regulate them, just like the internet did. There is rising concern about the dangers of these technologies. Experts warn artificial intelligence could be as dangerous as nuclear weapons. Okay, let's move on to our first segment of our report today, which is on the signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And let's read Luke chapter 21, verse 25. This is where Jesus references this. Jesus is speaking. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and the waves roaring. I'd like to mention that a lot of these earthquakes that I am reporting to you happen out in the seas. So I believe that Jesus, when he's talking about the seas and the waves roaring, is referring to these earthquakes that are happening out in the seas. Okay, here's our first subject about signs in the heavens. And it's once in a blue moon. There is a blue moon on July 31st, 2015. And I got this information from timeanddate.com, and I am just paraphrasing from this website. Quote, paraphrasing, I should say. There are two astronomical definitions of a blue moon. Both are a type of full moon. Contrary to popular belief, a blue moon is not actually blue in color. The moon very rarely actually looks blue, and if it does, it's because of a certain size dust particle in the atmosphere. The phrase once in a blue moon is colloquially used to suggest that something is very rare, but just how rare depends on your definition. In astronomy, an astronomical season normally has 3 full moons. Periodically, it will have 4 full moons, and that extra full moon is called a blue moon. Curiously, it's the 3rd full moon of the 4 that is referred to as a blue moon. The second definition of a blue moon is when there are 2 full moons in the same calendar month. And the second full moon, in this case, is called a blue moon. Such a blue moon, second full moon in a single calendar month, will occur next Friday, July 31st, 2015 at 10:43 a.m. UTC. Such blue moons occur rather frequently, at least once every 2 or 3 years. Another interesting fact is that every 19 years, the month of February has no full moon. This phenomenon will occur in 2018. Okay, moving on. PenMay.com, biggest solar storm in decade batters Earth, may hit global power communications networks. This article is actually a couple weeks old, but I thought it was still worth reporting. Quote, Earth is being battered by a huge solar storm, which could disrupt the power grid and GPS, as well as letting people see beautiful auroras. A potent blast of magnetic plasma shot out of the sun on Sunday, traveling faster than usual, according to the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It brought with it the largest solar storm, at least since March, and perhaps since September 2005. The solar weather weather brought with it auroras, spectacular lights that could be seen over the United States overnight. Their effects were spotted and shared by Scott Kelly, an American astronaut who is currently on the International Space Station. End quote. And here's another article about that. DrRoySpencer.com. Aurora seen as far south as Georgia and Arkansas. The severe geomagnetic storm late yesterday produced rare auroras seen as far south as Georgia and Arkansas last night. The same solar storm brought rare auroras to Australia as well. So they could see it in these auroras in Australia, in Georgia, Arkansas, and this Scott Kelly, who is aboard the International Space Station, could see them from space as well. I would definitely say that's a sign in the heavens. Okay, Mail Online. Asteroid worth $5.4 trillion in precious metals passed Earth on Sunday, July 17th. Quote, the space rock has attracted the attention of asteroid mining company Planetary Resources because it is thought to have 100 million tons, a core of 100 million tons of platinum that the company might one day want to exploit, end quote. Investment Watch. Scientists warn sun will go to sleep in 2030. Temperatures to plummet. And I just want to make a little comment with this article. I don't necessarily believe this article because I believe that in the year 2030 we are going to be in the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. So I don't necessarily agree, but I'm still going to bring you the article. Quote, is a mini ice age on the way? Scientists warn the sun will go to sleep in 2030 and could cause temperatures to plummet. New study claims to have cracked predicting solar cycles, says that between 2030 and 2040, solar cycles will cancel each other out, could lead to Maunder minimum effect that saw the River Thames freeze over, end quote. Financial Times. Pluto reveals more thrilling secrets. And we know that they recently were able to video Pluto, and it took 9 years for this for them to get there. But they now have pictures of Pluto, and so there's a lot of interesting things about the planet Pluto. Ice flows, quote, ice flows on the surface and a haze extending 130 kilometers up into a thin atmosphere are the latest wonders of Pluto, revealed by NASA scientists after analyzing observations from the New Horizons spacecraft's flight past the distant planet. 7 hours after the flyby on July 15th, New Horizons aimed a camera back at Pluto, capturing sunlight streaming through the hazy atmosphere. Preliminary analysis of the beautiful bright ring around the planet's dark disk shows 2 main layers of haze at around 80 kilometers and 50 kilometers above the surface. The hazes detected in this image are a key element in creating the complex hydrocarbon compounds that give Pluto's surface its reddish hue, said Michael Summers, a New Horizons scientist at George Mason University, end quote. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the blood moon that is going to happen on September 28th. And I don't know if you've heard about the blood moon tetrad, which is a series of 4 blood moons that happen within a 2-year period. Now, and a blood moon is a lunar eclipse. Whenever these lunar eclipses have happened on Jewish feast days, they have been very significant for Israel. So we have the 4th blood moon of this tetrad happening on September 28th, 2015. We also have 2 weeks before that a total solar eclipse, which is going to be on the 15th of September, which is also prophetic for Israel. And so we have these lot of signs happening in the heavens right now, and I think it's very significant with all of the other issues that are happening at the same time. I think Jesus is right at the door, and he's coming back very, very soon. Our next story is kind of it has to do with the heavens, but in a different way. So, the Daily Beast, Moscow could be prepping for space war with aggressive new satellites. Quote, the Kremlin says its nimble new satellites are just for communications, but they look and act an awful like prototype weapons. Whatever Cosmos 2491 was, it wasn't some innocuous communication satellite. And over the next year and a half, Russia launched 2 more of the mysterious maneuvering spacecraft, each time sneaking it into orbit as part of a routine ComSat launch. No one outside the Russian government and perhaps the Pentagon knows for sure what Cosmos 2491, 2499, and 2504 are. But it's clear enough that the 3 mystery satellites, what they could do in theory, zipping across orbital planes hundreds of thousands of feet above the Earth, the nimble little spacecraft, which are apparently the size of a mini refrigerator, are able to get really close to other satellites, close as in a few dozen feet away. And if they can get that close, the little robots could spy on, hijack, and even destroy other satellites. In other words, Cosmos 2491 and its triplets might be space weapons, the likes of which few other nations possess. And if so, they could upset the orbital balance of power at a time when government agencies, armies, scientists, and everyday people in the United States especially depend on satellites for communication, surveillance, science, and navigation. Our nation's advantage in space is no longer a given. U.S. Air Force General William Shelton, then head of Air Force Space Command, told Congress in March 2014. The ever-evolving space environment is increasingly contested as potential adversary capabilities grow in both number and sophistication. But the Pentagon won't exactly say what it thinks the satellites are for. Nor, of course, will the Kremlin specify the craft's purpose. In a brief statement in December, Russian Federal Space Agency Chief Oleg Ostapenko insisted the mystery satellites were peaceful in nature and not, as outside observers feared, killer satellites. To be clear, if indeed the Cosmos triplets are weapons, they're certainly not the only ones in Earth's orbit. The United States, Sweden, Japan, and China have all tested maneuvering satellites that could perform the close-flying, sat-frying tricks that the new Russian craft are apparently capable of doing. It's all being done in the name of satellite maintenance and repair, but the same technology can be deployed for more aggressive purposes. America's satellites spy on the ground and sea, support vital scientific research, and relay radio messages, including the signals that control drones and help soldiers, not to mention the millions of commuters find their way via GPS. Of the world's roughly 1,200 active satellites, nearly half are American, while Russia and China each possess a 10% share of orbital hardware. And when Russia quietly boosts 3 highly maneuverable and potentially armed spacecraft into orbit and then declines to explain their purpose, it's sure to keep U.S. military officials awake at night, staring into the night sky, wondering just what the fleet-footed little Russian robots are up to and how they might counter them. End quote. So this is very dangerous. We have, we mostly focus our attention to the wars that are happening on the earth, but there is a war in the heavens as far as these satellites are concerned. So we live in just such a precarious time. Let's move on to our last topic, and it's about DNA manipulation, and very quickly, DNA manipulation is what the mark of the beast will ultimately be, some form of DNA manipulation that the Antichrist will implement halfway through the tribulation period. Satan, who is not omniscient, is trying to be like God. God is a magnificent creator. Some of the creations that God has made are beyond our comprehension, like these 4 living creatures that we hear about in the book of Ezekiel and in the book of Revelation. But no doubt they are strange to our imagination. If God made them, they must be beautiful. But what Satan is doing is manipulating God's handiwork, God's perfection, and he's tampering with the genius, the creative genius of God. And this article, I have 2 articles, but I can only bring you one because of time. This article gives quotes from scientists, the scientists who have developed these processes and these technologies, and from their own mouths are saying that it's dangerous. And so let's read from this article. And this article, and I encourage you, this was a very long article. It's from Wired, and I encourage you to just Google Wired, and the name of the article is Easy DNA Editing Will Remake the World, Buckle Up, and read it for yourself. It's very troubling, but it's also very, very informative as to what is really going on in these laboratories. And it again points to how close we are to just the return of Jesus Christ. And we really are living in the last days. If anyone's listening to this message and you don't believe that we're living in the last days, I just pray that God will open your eyes, spiritual eyes, to the reality that everything that was described in the Bible, describing the end times, is in play, and it's increasing. Everything, it's all converging together. So let's read what I hope I can get most of this article read to you. Okay, Wired. Easy DNA editing will remake the world. Buckle up. The Genesis engine. We now have the power to quickly and easily alter DNA. It could eliminate disease. It could solve world hunger. It could supply unlimited clean energy. It could really get out of hand. Dr. Amy Maxman. That's a quote from her. 140 scientists gathered in Monterey, California in 1975 for an unprecedented conference called the Asilomar Conference. They were worried about what people called recombinant DNA, the manipulation of the source code of life. DNA is what genes are made of, and genes are the basis of heredity. Preeminent genetic researchers like David Baltimore went to Asilomar to grapple with the implications of being able to decrypt and reorder genes. It was a godlike power to plug genes from one living thing into another. Used wisely, It had the potential to save millions of lives, but the scientists also knew their creations might slip out of their control. They wanted to consider what ought to be off limits. A few attendees fretted about the idea of modifications of the human germline, changes that would be passed on from one generation to the next, but most thought that was so far off as to be unrealistic. Now, earlier this year, Baltimore, the same scientist, joined 17 other researchers for another California conference. It was a feeling of deja vu, Baltimore says. There he was again, gathered with some of the smartest scientists on Earth to talk about the implications of genome engineering. The stakes, however, have changed. Everyone at the Napa, California meeting had access to a gene editing technique called Crispr-Cas9. The first term is an acronym for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, a description of a genetic basis of the method. Cas9 is the name of a protein that makes it work. Technical details aside, CRISPR-Cas9 makes it easy, cheap, and fast to move genes around, any genes, in any living thing, from bacteria to people. These are monumental moments in the history of biomedical research, Baltimore says. They don't happen every day. The technique is revolutionary, and like all revolutions, it's perilous. Remember that word, perilous. CRISPR goes well beyond anything the Asilomar conference discussed. It could at last allow genetics researchers to conjure everything anyone has ever worried they would. Designer babies, invasive mutants, species-specific bioweapons, and a dozen other apocalyptic sci-fi tropes. Cas9 does something almost magical. It changes shape, grasping the DNA and slicing it with a precise molecular scalpel. Cas9 protein proved to be a programmable machine for DNA editing. One of CRISPR's strengths is that it works on every living thing. This kind of power makes the scientist, her name was Dudna, feel like she opened Pandora's box. That's a quote from the scientist herself. Use CRISPR to treat, say, Huntington's disease, a debilitating neurological disorder in the womb when an embryo is just a ball of cells, perhaps. But the method could also possibly alter less medically relevant genes like the ones that make skin wrinkle. We haven't had the time as a community to discuss the ethics and the safety, Dudna says, and frankly, whether there is any real clinical benefit of this versus other ways of dealing with genetic diseases. Okay, I want to read the last part. Pick your creature, pick your gene, and you can bet someone somewhere is giving it a go. Engineered humans are a ways off, but nobody thinks they are science fiction anymore. But straight out editing of a human embryo sets off all sorts of alarms, both in terms of ethics and legality. The world has changed. Genome editing started with just a few big labs, putting in lots of effort, trying something 1,000 times for one or two successes, says Hank Greeley, a bioethicist at Stanford. Now it's something that someone with a BS and a couple $1,000s worth of equipment can do. What was impractical is now almost every day. That's a big deal. In an odd reversal, it's the scientists who are showing more fear than the civilians. When I ask Church, who is another scientist, for his most nightmarish CRISPR scenario, he mutters something about weapons and then stops short. He says he hopes to take the specifics of the idea, whatever it is, to his grave. But thousands of other scientists are working on CRISPR. Not all of them will be as cautious. You can't stop science from progressing, Ginnick says. Science is what it is. He's right. Science gives people power, and power is unpredictable. I want to read the verse. I love it when I'm reading an article and it uses the exact wording of the Bible. And they said perilous. So I quickly went to 2 Timothy 3:1, which says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come." Now the Greek definition of perilous is fierce, difficult, dangerous, hard to bear, troublesome, harsh, and savage. What we have going on now in these laboratories is very dangerous. And with everything else that we are seeing take shape in Bible prophecy, the stage is set. And what's happening now is it's the details are getting filled in, and each detail that gets filled in confirms the Bible more and more and more. If you're not right with the Lord Jesus Christ, I compel you to make that decision today to receive Him as your Lord and to get right with Him, get your life in order, surrender to Him. Surrender to Him. Do it today because time is short. Time is very short. He's coming soon. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Maranatha, come quickly, Lord Jesus.